Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope you are all well. Thank you all so much for all the support you have shown this channel. I appreciate each and every last one of you. Special announcement before we get started. This Friday, April 28th, 2023 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the United States, I will be joining two good friends of mine, Inner Scare Sleep and Inner Scare Wifey. We will be doing a live read right here on Back to Ashes. Please plan accordingly, as when we're doing the live, we will be interacting with you in real time and also taking story requests in the order that we receive them. I'm excited and I hope to see you all there. Down in the description below, if you like what you are hearing, you can buy me a coffee, as it does support Back to Ashes and myself as well. If you would like to become a member of Back to Ashes, plan start at $1.99 a month and up, according to the tier that you choose. All that information can also be found in the description below. Now, with all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Now, sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and enjoy this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Ghost Stories and Encounters. Disclaimer: after this introduction is over, there will be an ad. I will read the first story, there will be an ad. And from then on, there will be no more ads in the video. It's been a long time since this happened. I think 2006-ish. I can't remember the exact year, but it was shortly before I entered high school. I did one of those week-long Christian summer camps with my school at Hume Lake in California. I've done a little internet searching, but never found other stories connected with the campground. I'm hoping by sharing mine that maybe someone else will have experienced something similar in that place. One night, everybody in the camp gets in the big auditorium and speakers talk about life, death, Jesus, you know, the works. They had the silent time, and I was feeling emotional at that point because a cousin had passed away within the last year, and everything they talked about just combined and overwhelmed me. So I wanted to go back to the cabin to be by myself and cry a bit. I'm normally a scaredy cat with a big imagination of the dark, but with all that I was thinking of, I didn't feel scared to walk alone. The cabin was close to the edge of the camp with a dirt road separating it from the woods. There were orange streetlights on the road I was walking up, but not on that road where it teed off. At that T in the road, right in the tree line, was a human-sized white shape, like it was made of white light. No distinguishable legs or arms, but I could clearly see a head and shoulders. So, picture a head shape down to shoulders, and then the sides just went straight down to the ground. There were no strange sounds or anything else. I freaking bolted back down the way I came and bumped into my group of cabin mates since the auditorium event finished. One tried to say that maybe I saw a cougar or wild animal. For years, I would involuntarily tear up and get chills and goosebumps when retelling this. Since then, I always tear up when I hear others' first-person ghost stories. I wish I hadn't gotten scared at that time. But anyway, I've always hoped I'm not the only one to have seen something there. Recently, I have decided to confront an old childhood trauma with my parents. Though they claim to not remember what I am talking about, and I have no other way to find an easy explanation for this. Basically, when I was younger, I live with my parents in the countryside of Georgia. I don't remember anything strange, which could have foreshadowed the events I'm about to describe. It's just that one day, when I was like 10 or 12, I found some old log shack in the woods. The shack by itself isn't odd, but I heard some banging noise from it and saw that the door kept moving. I thought some animal probably snuck in there and got stuck, so I didn't pay it any mind at the time. I did return to the shack the next day to see that the banging still persisted. And then it just kept going the next day, and the next, and so on. Eventually, it's been like 5 weeks and the banging was still there. I don't think anything big enough to make that noise would still be alive, stuck in the shack like that. Also, for my visits to the shack, I noticed a weak groan coming from the door when I got close enough. That's about when I decided to ask my dad about it. He didn't seem to care at first, but when I did bring him to the shack, he looked a bit scared. Then, I shit you not, he went back home to get his gun and had me stay in the house. A few minutes later, I hear like 4 gunshots. My dad kept a .357, so it kind of surprised me whatever was in the shack needed more than a few shots from the caliber. My dad then had a few friends come over to help him out. Pretty sure he wanted help to dispose of whatever he killed. Thing is that I saw him and his friends bring a person-shaped body bag onto their truck. Strange part too is that my dad and his pals clearly thought the smell was incredibly putrid, and there were already flies around the bag. That was just an hour after the gunshots. But this thing was apparently already decayed. Well, that's all I really have to say. But feel free to prod for more info if you need to explain what the hell I encountered. So, for context, I am in the Navy. I work occasional security in Naval Base Ventura County. I say occasional as I am more of an auxiliary type. Help to man security at the gates, or ECPs, and security is not my primary job. Anyways, one of the gates was recently renamed after Eric L. Knott. He was a CB, or Navy construction worker, who was killed by enemy mortar fire in Fallujah in 2004. That's all I really know about it. He was a young guy who was killed, and it was named in honor of him. But then I heard something else. His unit was Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 4, or NMCB-4 for short. That unit is garrisoned in that base when not deployed. While standing the night shift on a Saturday night, me, a CB from NMCB-4, and a third unimportant person were shifted at Knott Gate. 0300 pulls around, and there is not a soul in sight, not even the occasional car driving through the intersection. We are all struggling to stay awake when a car's headlights partially blinded us. I step out to greet the driver and check his credentials. His credential and ID card looked legit, and I noticed he had the same last name as the gate, Knott. Looked up at him to kind of make a little joke about it, and I was greeted by a pale, cold stare. I don't know if my mind is playing tricks on me or if I just was tired, but he was wearing a uniform that would have only been worn in the early 2000s. I could barely speak, and he didn't move a muscle. I finally choked up, saying that he can go. And while he lowered his card, he didn't look away from me while he drove. I thought it was odd and creepy, and I mentioned it to the other sentries in the shack. The dude with the NMCB4 told me, in a legend has it, but I don't really believe it kind of way, that Eric Knott wasn't supposed to die that Friday in Falua. He didn't know the specifics, but rumor was that the command he was with effed up, and his spirit will sometimes come to scoff at the gate they named after him to try and make up for his mistake. When he showed me a picture of Eric Knott, my heart sank. All I could choke up was, that was the effing dude. He didn't believe me, of course, and was convinced I was just tired. But now, every time I have to man the watch at Knott Gate, I just hope that Petty Officer Knott won't decide to come through. It's only happened once, and everyone kind of laughs it off. I do too. But inside, I believe I saw him, still angry at his superiors for letting him die. This was a long time ago, when I was younger. My mom put me and my brother to bed and went to her room. She was still awake, and light from her bedroom with a slightly open door was shining into the hallways, so it wasn't really dark since the hallway is short and small. The door of my room is right in front of my bed, and I was looking into the hallway while laying in my bed when suddenly this small black creature that kind of looks like a mix of a goblin and a devil passed in front of my door from the right side of the hallway, which was the side my mother's room was located, towards the left side, which led to my brother's room and the bathroom. My first thought was that it was my imagination, but about 3 seconds later, my brother, whose room is next to mine, said, "Mom, is that you? Something passed in the hallway." My mom came out of her room and freaked out. She searched the only place that the end of the hallway was leading to, which was the bathroom, and found nothing. No windows were open either. I would say that the creature was around 60 to 70 centimeters tall. I'm not exactly sure, but since there was a light switch next to my door, I kind of measured in my mind with the help of that. It didn't have a tail or horns or wings. Its body was skinny and bony, and it was all black. It also made no sound and was extremely fast. It happened within a second. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like when something is so fast you don't actually see it physically moving, but rather you see it standing still in the fraction of a moment before it's gone. Since then, I have not seen this creature again, and I have no idea where it went. It's as if it disappeared into thin air. I've had some other paranormal experiences later in life, like getting bloody scratches in my sleep, but I've found out that I move in my sleep, so it can be explained with that. But this, I don't know if my brother saw it, so I would have said that it was my imagination, but since he did in fact see it, then there was definitely something there. I have no other explanation. To this day, I'm still wondering what the hell it was we saw. I am a 20-year-old female, and this happened a few months ago, but I remember it very vividly and wanted to share. Please Let me know what you think. I had a busy week at college, so I decided I needed to get out of the house to drive to my boyfriend's empty house to have a space all to myself. He was traveling for work, so it was just me there. It was supposed to rain that night. As I was walking to the parking lot to get my car, there was no rain at all. I got in my car to drive. Rain started pouring, so I turned on the windshield wipers to the max setting. The car had been having problems, but not related to the windshield. As I was driving along the road, about 15 minutes from my college, the passenger side windshield wiper flew off. I noticed that, thankfully, it was still on the hood of the car. I pull over on the side of the road, farmlands to the right and woods to the left of me. There is no rain as soon as I get out of the car. I fiddle with the windshield and decide that I can't get it on right now, as I was a little freaked out that I was on the side of the road. So, I decided to tie a plastic garbage bag to it and carry on my way. As soon as I got back in the car, it was pouring. Finally, I got to the house and had a relaxing night to myself. I didn't really think this was that strange, but I just wanted to add that part to set the scene. For the rest of the night, I was relaxing all by myself. In the morning, around 11 a.m., I was dreaming, but it was a very vivid dream. However, I could still tell it was a dream. I was floating in the darkest of space, but could see twinkles of light in the background. I assumed that they were stars. Even though I was in the darkest depth of space, seemingly alone, supposed to feel cold, all I felt was warmth and a welcoming presence. I could not see anything other than the stars, but felt a presence of something around me that also knew I was there. It felt like something else was around me. I assumed it was beings. They told me that they communicate with me through thoughts in my mind. If I thought something, they would hear it and pass the information back to me through my mind. I did not hear anything, just my own thoughts and their communications back with me. They told me how to communicate, and I thought I was scared. So they told me, "You are safe. We would not hurt you." They additionally told me that they communicate through touch and lightly touched my shoulders and hip. I do not remember the rest. I was woken up by the loudest train noise, which caused my heart to stop racing. It was like I was right next to a train, but there is no railroad in sight for miles. Hello everyone. So, this happened to me when I lived with a flatmate and worked nights. This one night, I came back home at around 2:30 a.m. And since my flatmate worked as ground staff and her shifts rotated every week, she was supposed to be home at around 6:30 a.m. that morning. I had a private balcony, and because it was winter, I kept it closed or my room would be freezing. I lived in a place that can get 2 or 1 degrees during winter, but that's it. So there was never a heating system in the house, but we had room heaters. It was odd that it was open since I remembered closing it before leaving for work, but chalked it off to my flatmate. I closed the open door to this balcony, turned off the light outside, and got into my usual routine of taking a bath and changing for bed. It was around 3 a.m. by then, and when I hit the pillow, I fell asleep immediately. Now, this was out of the ordinary for me, since it always takes me a good hour to fall asleep once in bed. I didn't remember falling asleep either. I woke up about an hour later as I was really cold and saw the door to the balcony was open yet again, and the lights were back on. I remember closing it and turning the lights off very clearly. From my bed, I had a diagonal view to the balcony, so I can see anyone who may be standing there. Just as I was about to get out of bed, I saw something move out of the shadows where I couldn't see, and into the light. It was me, and I climbed onto the steel railings. Once on top, she turned her neck to look back directly at me and smiled a little too wide for it to be a human being. She had too many teeth. Then she jumped off the balcony down into the fog. I was frozen. Not that I couldn't move, but more like I was shell-shocked. I got up from bed shakily after a couple of minutes, freaked out of my mind, and closed the door and turned off the lights outside again. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I still don't understand what I saw to this day, but it always inspires a chill down my back when I think about it. I haven't seen her again since that night. I was on the phone with my friend when the topic of the supernatural came up. After being on the topic for a few minutes, I passed by the door to my sunroom. I paced on the phone and heard a whisper saying what sounded to be me. "I am with you." It was just barely audible. I got spooked and told my friend, "No shit, man. I actually heard a voice." Although it scared me, I was quick to brush it off as nerves. Manifestations of my memory of past experiences I had when I was much younger. My memory is a bit foggy by how much time had passed, but sometime later, I hear banging happening in my sunroom, and my cat jumps. A while after that, I hear another whisper while passing the sunroom door. At this point, I'm pacing out of anxiety rather than focus. This time, it was too audible to even make out a word. While I'm sitting in my living room sometime later, I see my cat jumping around the window looking out the front, as if she were trying to attack something. Some time passes when I see a shadow figure swaying by my car parked in the street. At this point, I panic and make a call to a mental health hotline. Part of me wanting to believe I'm hallucinating, as I have had vivid hallucinations in the past while in manic states. However, I hadn't had a manic state in almost 3 years, and they don't tend to come up out of the blue. While I'm on the phone, explaining what I am seeing, a loud buzz interrupts the call for a few seconds. The hotline isn't that helpful, asking me if I took medication and when was the last time I did. A while later, probably about an hour, I was too anxious to sleep at this point, I hear the melody of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" somewhere in the house. I find where it was coming from and see that a sound machine we keep in the house for my niece in her occasional bedroom, our guest room, had gone off. I turn it off, terrified that it would turn back on immediately after I left the room, but it thankfully didn't. The last thing that happened, I'd say about 30 minutes later, was that my dog stared out the front window for a couple of minutes, looking stressed. Around 2005, right after college, I moved back to my hometown in San Diego. A lot of my friends still live there, so it was a super easy transition. It was also super easy to find friends to go ghost hunting, as we all love to get creeped out. I am from Chula Vista, so the legend of the Proctor Valley monster was nothing new. It was a folkloric story about a few different tropes. A woman in white roaming the desolate road. A phantom car that comes up behind you at high speeds, just to disappear right behind you. Our version of Sasquatch called the Zoobies, roaming the land, and even UFO sightings. It was a hodgepodge of paranormal activity. Mostly it was a 2-lane state bypass road that ran for a few miles between Chula Vista and Jamacha. That essentially was a service road for the airport antennas. But it was also right next to a high school, and for decades development didn't make it out of there, so it was a ripe setting for teens, drinking, and ghost stories. One day, my friend Sal and I decided to drive it, the road. We've done it maybe 10 times. It's very desolate and spooky. You occasionally see headlights in the distance, and it's almost always Border Patrol doing their rounds. Ever so often, you will see another car, undoubtedly looking for ghosts just like we would be. But this time, it was absolutely empty. You see familiar things there. Evidence of a bonfire, empty beer cans, abandoned appliances, etc. The road is half paved, half sanded over, so you always hear the tires as you change from surface to surface. This time, it seemed so boring. Nothing was out there. Just a stretch of nothingness. The second to last turn, my Jeep lost the back end a bit, so I understeered to straighten out. And as I did, the headlight focused on what we can only describe as a 7-foot owl with human-type legs and yellow eyes standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes and sand flew past us. We just sat there looking at this thing for what seemed like forever, but was maybe 45 seconds. It was taller than my car, a weird brown and black color, with white strikings on its chest. But it had human legs with knees and weirdly taloned feet. It had bright yellow eyes. Then, all of a sudden, it opened its wings and started to take off over our car, and it let out a very low and guttural screech as it flew over us. My friend and I just sat there trying to figure out what the hell just happened. We've been out there so many times, but never saw it again after that night. It's just past 2 a.m. and I'm currently, as I type this, sitting in the middle of a remote field in North Carolina. Without giving too much detail, I'm in the military. You can infer as to which branch and base on your own. And my buddy, I'll just call him Eddie, and I are helping conduct a field exercise. We're not the ones training. We're the ones that get to sit in a field from 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., freezing our asses off and reading a pre-written script over the radio every 15 to 30 minutes so that the guys working up for deployment can practice listening to enemy comms. After our last calm window, I call up my buddy at the other far end of the LZ to check in on him. I'd mentioned that as we had such frequent radio checks scheduled throughout the night, though the time stretched to about an hour apart at this point, and it was suggested that we try to get some sleep. I don't really trust myself to fall asleep because I regularly sleep through alarms or just autopilot hit the snooze button like some half-conscious zombie. That's when he tells me, "Oh, trust me, I ain't sleeping tonight." The way he said that seemed odd. Not like he was agreeing that he was afraid to sleep through his alarms, but like there was an entirely different reason that he'd also be pulling an all-nighter. So naturally, I ask him why, and now I'm really wishing I hadn't. He goes on to describe seeing a person walking up to him from the tall grass. Thinking it was simply one of the guys doing dismounted reconnaissance and just not being very stealthy, he shined his headlamp on him. What he saw was a guy in full kit, wearing old BDUs, with his left arm missing and his head hanging lazily on his shoulder, as if it had been blown most of the way off. Eddie says the guy didn't look at him at all and walked straight into the tree line. He claims to have seen him clear as day. Now, Eddie and I aren't super close, but we're work friends. That said, we don't exactly have the dynamic to mess with each other like this, and I've never known him to be disingenuous. He sounded noticeably shaken, and I have no reason not to believe him. I've always believed in the supernatural to at least some extent, though to which I am not sure. Though I'm never actually seen a ghost or anything out of the ordinary, to tell the truth. If I had, I surely didn't notice it. I've always wondered why some people seem to be so lucky where I was not. I sort of wondered this aloud on the phone with Eddie, noting that I'd either been on my phone or reading my book all night in between calm windows. Eddie suggested I keep reading or distracting myself in some manner, as the whole ordeal left him practically shitting his pants. Part of me is a sort of jealous of him, if I'm being completely honest. I've always thought it'd be really cool to see something like that. Another part of me hopes I continue on with my night in blissful ignorance, peacefully unaware of the things that go bump in the night. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. At first, my only concern was sleeping through my alarms. Now I've got a whole new reason as to why I'll be wide awake. Thanks, Eddie. I'm a 29-year-old female and have always had spooky happenings go on around me. I have multiple stories of seeing shadow people and spirits, and of hearing stuff that was less than natural. I might post about those other experiences someday, but for now, I will just tell the stories of a demon that followed my family around for a while. I haven't talked about this in years, as I hated how crazy it made me sound. I also don't like talking about it because it tends to make activity start up again. But, luckily, no one in my family has experienced these things since I last saw him in 2012. I'll try to keep the stories as brief as possible, and only list what details are necessary, but buckle up, because there was a lot of activity for many years. A bit of background information. I grew up in a non-denominational Christian household. My dad in particular was a very strong believer. After him, my sister and I are the biggest believers, and my brother is now an atheist. though he was a believer at the time. My mom didn't experience this demon at all. In the house were my mom, my dad, my older brother and sister, and of course, I. My dad was the first one who saw him. It was in the early 2000s, I think 2001 or 2002. And my dad was studying to become a commercial airline pilot. He was licensed to fly helicopters and private Cessnas and jets, but he wanted to expand his horizons and challenge himself in a new way. He used to get up around 4 in the morning to study so that he wouldn't lose any time during work. He operated a flight school in our hometown, so he was a busy guy. Or during family time after my siblings and I would get home from school. My dog would always accompany him to the dining room, which is where he would set up for the morning. One of these mornings, my dog went to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard from the dining room and started barking like she was going mad. My dad ran to let her out before she woke anyone up, but she immediately started whining and backed away from the door once he had it open. My dad, who initially thought he saw a possum or a coyote, as we used to get them in our backyard often, told her to go outside to chase whatever it was out of our yard. Usually, she would tear off like a bolt of lightning, but she just continued to whine and back up. My dad looked out the door to see if he could see what was scaring her so badly, and that was when he saw him. A large, hulking black figure that was moving very slowly, encircling the house next door. As soon as he saw him, my dad gasped and froze. When he gasped, the figure stopped and turned its head toward my dad. He didn't really have a face, but my dad felt its eyes on him. As soon as it looked at him, the words "strongman" popped into my dad's head. He knew that was what it was called. They stared at each other for a bit before Strongman eventually turned its head back forward and resumed his slow march around the house next door. I was only 9 or 10 at the time, so I didn't hear the story until much later. But this does mark the first time since anyone in my family saw him. After that, my dad would periodically look out the windows when he was studying to check before he would let my dog out to do her business. And he would see him from time to time. But now, instead of circling the house next door, he would be circling ours. The next person to see him was my brother. At this time, my brother was a typical angsty teenager with an added helping of snark. He was about 14 or 15 and was going through a hard time at school, which made him act out at home. My parents were struggling with how to reconnect with him and coming up short. One night, my brother was listening to music in his room and brooding over something or the other, as you do when you've got more big feelings than you know how to handle. When he saw a giant shadow rise up from the bottom of his window to pass the top. He had heard my dad's story by this point and knew immediately that this was what he was seeing. Now, this part is going to sound ridiculous because, well, let's just be honest, because it is ridiculous. My brother growled at it. Yes, literally growled. As you might suspect, nothing happened. My brother started feeling this really oppressive energy and then said, "You are not welcome here." Strongman, I'm going to start calling him SM because I hate saying or even typing that name, didn't move. My brother then said, In the name of Jesus, leave." He then slowly moved away. Around this time, my sister, at the time 13 or 14, was home alone one night. She was in the living room watching TV when she heard a knock at the front door. She went to go check it, but didn't see anyone there. She shrugged it off and went back to go watch TV. She then heard a knock on the sliding glass door in the dining room. Now she is spooked because that goes to our backyard. And why would someone knock on that door? She didn't get up to look and kind of huddles into blankets trying to hide. Then she hears a knock at the French doors that lead to the backyard from the living room, essentially right next to where she was sitting. She immediately started to pray, and then heard knocking coming from all 3 doors at once. We came home to find her sobbing and huddled in a ball of blankets in her room. After this, I was finally told about what my dad had been seeing and what my brother experienced. We don't know if what happened to my sister was because of SM, but it definitely was intended to scare her. After this, the sightings or experiences seemed to slow down, but would always pick right back up if any of us talked about it, either with each other or to an outside party. In 2005, my dad died in a routine flight check, and my whole family kind of imploded. My mom went off the deep end into alcoholism and just shut down. My brother was away doing his service for the Finnish military, and my sister and I really only had each other to cling on to. My sister kind of became my secondary mom and was dealing with the stressors of her senior year of high school and trying to find out what she was going to do for college. To this point, I had never experienced anything supernatural. I started doubting God and stopped going to church. It wasn't so much that I didn't believe in God anymore, but I was bitterly angry at him for taking away my dad and the effect that it had on my family. My mom decided that we couldn't live in the house that had so many memories of my dad, so she bought the house next door. Not the one from the beginning of the story, but the one on the other side. I was just 14 at this time. As it was right next door, we took our time with moving. A few months after moving, I had my first experience with SM. The house we moved into was a 2-story, and my new bedroom faced our old house and had the wooden fence separating the 2 backyards right underneath it. One night, I was up late reading and my mom was out drinking with some colleagues. My brother and sister were now in college and living in the dorms on campus. My dog was with me in my bedroom, so I felt comfortable. As I was reading, I started to feel heavy. I don't know how to really describe it other than feeling wrong and heavy. I chalked it up to Home Alone jitters and went on reading. As I was reading, I started hearing a scratching on the fence below my window. My dog started growling intermittently, and I would have to tell her to shush because I thought it was just a possum. As I said before, we got them a lot in that area. It wasn't until a few minutes passed that I started to realize that the scratches were coming in rounds of 3s. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Pause. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Pause. So on and so on for a good long while. The feeling of heaviness just increased, and I started to feel some fear prickling along my skin. I closed my book and the scratching stopped, I waited a minute and didn't hear anything, so I just opened my book back up to keep reading. The scratching started again. I closed my book again and it stopped mid-scratch. Even though I was feeling far from God, I started praying for Jesus to take away all evil from the house and to send his light in it stead. And prayed and prayed and prayed. The scratching got louder. The louder I prayed until I finally said, "Amen," and the scratching stopped fully. I couldn't sleep after that and had to wait for my mom to come home at around 4 a.m. that morning. About a year or so later, my sister and I went on a trip to Finland to visit my grandparents. While there, I had a crazy dream while I was napping on my grandparents' couch. I won't post the entirety of it unless anyone is interested, but essentially, I dreamed that I was getting possessed and was woken up by my grandma saying I was doing things in my sleep that I felt myself doing in my dream. It was really freaky and I hated it. Around this time, I also started waking up at around 3 a.m. every single night. This continued when we went back home and eventually just became a part of life. I didn't think anything of it until I was telling a friend about my sleep issues, and she told me that 3 a.m. was the demonic witching hour. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. After this summer, my mom got remarried to my stepdad and we moved to his house. His house was in the older part of town with lots of beautiful Victorians on tree-lined streets. It was picturesque, to say the least. Regardless, this is where most of the activity happened. I have story upon story of different activity happening in this house, but those are better told at another time, as they don't necessarily relate to SM. I did have multiple times when the same feeling of heaviness that accompanied him would just come upon me, and I would pray him away. I saw him just one more time at this house. I was coming home from an evening church service and was about to turn into my driveway when he just rose up, seemingly from the ground, right in front of my car. I thought I was going to hit something solid, but I just drove right through him and turned into my driveway. I was so scared to get out of the car, but that overwhelming feeling became too oppressive and I had to get away. I started praying out loud and ran to my house. I saw him one other time in college outside of my dorm when I looked out the window one evening after a night of late studying. He always showed up when things would start to feel normal again, almost as if to say, "I'm still here." It was awful. That was the last time I saw him, and I haven't had a demonic experience since. Thank God. My apologies for the story being so long. It just happened over many, many years. I don't randomly wake up at 3 a.m. anymore, and I don't get that oppressively heavy feeling randomly either. I hope I never experience either of those things ever again. My childhood home was in a very rural area, so rural in fact, that it was situated right by a forest. And I don't mean a pitiful excuse of a forest that's basically a dozen trees in between two roads. The real ass wild. I loved exploring it, finding big bugs, a cool rock, or even animal skulls. But, understandably, my mom wasn't too happy about her little girl going into the woods by herself. My older brother would come along with me, and it didn't take long until we knew the nearby area like the back of our hand. One day, we tried going in a new direction, and after a good 30 minutes of walking, we came across a large pond. It was our best find yet. Over the years, we had plenty of friends over, spending entire days messing around the pond. We never encountered anything strange. Nothing more than the occasional deer. We thought we'd conquered the woods. During our teens, my girlfriends and I would try to enjoy summer to its fullest. As crazy as it sounds, we often made the hike to the pond and then promptly undressed for the rest of the day. Swimming naked was way more comfortable. Tan lines were avoided, and overall the vibe was very fun. Of course, we made sure none of the guys in our friend group came, though a couple wieners bouncing around wouldn't have bothered me. My friends didn't share my opinion. Occasionally, we did get a peeping Tom or two, but they seemed like honest accidents, since we never announced what we were going to be up to. And one day, as we were relaxing in the nude, we caught one of our male friends having an eyeful. We made him leave. No hard feelings. He didn't know we'd be there and naked. We didn't blame him for taking a quick look. Boys will be boys. Not too long after his departure, though, we started feeling like we were being watched, followed by a subtle but lingering smell reminiscent of rotten eggs. Uncomfortable, two of the girls decided they wanted to leave, but upon reaching the area we'd left our clothes at, they were shocked to find some of them missing. That was too far. We started screaming for the little thief, looking for him in the tree line. Nothing. As we gathered our stuff to leave, the feeling of eyes on our bodies grew stronger and stronger, like we were standing naked in the middle of a crowd. We barely said a word, like we were waiting for a branch to crack or reveal the perv's location. But then shrieks erupted from some of my friends. I quickly understood why and joined them as I felt an invisible touch, which I can't quite describe without using inappropriate terms. We picked up what we could, mainly towels to cover ourselves, and we ran away. The icy touch also vanished once we were away from the pond, but that didn't slow our pace. We finally reached my house and didn't dare speak a word of what happened to my mother and brother, too embarrassed and worried we'd be called crazy. My friends borrowed some basic clothing and left. The following day, we confronted the friend we'd caught watching us. I'm very good at reading body language and facial expressions. He never showed any sign of dishonesty when we detailed how he didn't stick around after being discovered. Any possibility of a rational explanation, someone we could get angry at, was gone. Oh my, I have had a lot of crazy experiences. My parents grew up in the Philippines, and my dad says we've had lots of witch doctors in our family. Long story short, the third eye has been passed down through our family for generations, and he has lots of crazy stories about things he's experienced and seen, but since he and my mom moved to Australia, he thinks he's either lost his third eye or there's just nothing here. But turns out I inherited it when I was born here. So at the start of 2019, I had a casual job in a cafe, and I come home in the middle of the day. My bedroom is at the very back of the house, so I walk through the entire house and no one is home. I let my dog in and we head over to my room, and I decide to do some cleaning. We don't have round doorknobs that twist in my house. Our doors have those horizontal handles that you grab and push down. I was going to take out a bag of rubbish, and as I reach for the handle, it violently starts moving. Like someone has grabbed the other side of it and started pushing on it. Bang, bang, bang. I immediately launched forward and slammed the door shut and locked it. It was just a strong, violent presence that my first thought was, someone is in the house trying to rob me. I stood still, trying to listen out if I can hear any movement, but there's nothing. My dog is a smart dog, too. If there were intruders in the house, he would have been barking and jumping at the door. But he was all fine and dandy. I messaged my family chat asking if anyone is home, but it was the middle of the day and they all said they were at work. A few nights later, I wake up to the sound of my dog aggressively growling. My dog is a little Jack Russell cross poodle, and he's a very friendly, docile boy. I have never heard him, or any domestic animal for that fact, growl so deep in his belly. This dude was proper mad. His stance was wide, his head was low, tail tucked between his legs, and his eyes were fixed to the corner of my room. And he was so still and was so angry. I have never seen him like this before. At first I was scared, and then I got mad and I looked to where my dog was looking, as if I knew where exactly this entity was, and I pointed my finger and said, "You can try to haunt me, but you leave my effing dog alone." I was so mad. I feel the energy shift in the room, and my dog's eyes started following something across the room to the other side of my bed, and I couldn't see it. But somehow, I knew I was looking right at it, and it just felt like a standoff, and whatever it was left for the night. I decided to tell my family what's been happening at dinner one night, and my mom went pale. Her eyes widened, and her jaw dropped. And I knew it was happening to her too. My mom is super skeptical about spirits and ghosts. She always has a logical explanation for everything. But even she opened up about things that have been happening to her during the same time. This carried on for a bit, but I finally decided to sage the house and ask whatever it was to leave. I don't care if people believe me or not, but I know what I saw. It was effing crazy. Hi, my name is Mathis, and I'm diagnosed with schizophrenia. I really wanted to share this with someone and see what they could possibly say about it. So, the day that it started was when I had a breakdown and asked for help. And I made clear that it didn't matter where it came from. That day, I had an experience that changed my whole life. I was crying and asking for help. My bed shaked like an earthquake. I saw a ghost of a female demon with 2 giant horns, and something came descending upon me, like a snowflake, but a bit bigger. It was black but translucent. It entered my body and I felt cold where it landed. Then I slept and was out of my body. While I remember leaving, I don't remember what I did. It changed to me having a conversation with 2 people. One being more human, where I could see him, but the second one, I thought it was the bad one. I thought that because it was like a fog. His color was black, and I signed a contract, I suppose. I signed something. That I am sure. I started hearing voices, seeing shadow people, demons in photos, and eventually intense pain in my heart and the inability to sleep. Then I got diagnosed with schizophrenia. I didn't accept it. Then I got the most excruciating pain in my heart and started to see things more vividly. Once I saw my arm black with big nails like a demon arm. Then it opened my third eye, and I saw the end of the world. And what this version showed me was of nuclear warfare with angels descending from heaven. Jesus, of course. I am really stupid, and I still refuse to take my meds. So this happened to me plenty of times. I'd go off my meds, felt someone pushing something to my heart, and the pain. The last one I saw, my soul being taken to an altar, and it changed from white to black. That was the most intense pain I felt. I didn't sleep for 7 days and only ended when I took my medication. I woke up to the voice of God with angels singing, and while this is extremely sad, I don't remember what he said. I'm pretty sure he was there to help me. I once had a vivid dream where I saw myself as a demon, like I was watching myself and touching my face. I just knew it was me. My real problem is I'm bored and hate my life. While nothing happens when I'm on my meds, things will happen when I'm not. I hear screams. Spirits keep coming and telling me it's bad. One even uses my breathing nostrils to say bad, bad, bad. The problem is there. I'm fascinated with the things I shouldn't be. I was warned many times in dreams, but I still refuse. While I was never a bad guy, I suppose, I always helped someone in need when I could. I didn't interact much with the world. So this comes from an atheist that didn't believe in God and asked for help and got what he deserved. Any information or any similar stories anyone can share? I think I'm ill, but it's not as superficial as I'm a schizophrenic. I think when I take the meds, I deny the demon the contract. And when I don't take the meds, I'm agreeing with the contract. The most upsetting thing is, why would I do that? I did encounter a succubus, though. If it was the agreement, I don't know I had any fascination on Satan and why he left God. But after studying, I think he never really was an angel. This happened almost a decade ago, back when I was a senior in college. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, in Savannah, Georgia, a town known for being a paranormal hotspot. I was and am an atheist and don't really believe in the supernatural, but it's always been a fun topic to explore. However, I truly can't explain what happened that night. It was around midnight. I was in bed on my phone, getting ready to pass out for the evening. My girlfriend had gotten up to get a glass of water, and when she came back, she was acting really strange. I could tell something was wrong, and so I asked her. And she sheepishly said that something felt weird in the kitchen. I asked her to elaborate, and she couldn't. Just reiterated that something felt off and asked if I would go check it out. I got up, thinking that she had probably just spooked herself and just needed someone to tell her it was fine. My apartment was laid out so that the bedroom led to the living room, which led to the kitchen. The entire apartment had rugs on the floors, except the kitchen and bathroom, which were tiled. As soon as I stepped from the living room rug to the kitchen tile, I was filled with the strangest feeling of dread. There was almost an electrical feeling shooting through my body. Immediately, I was scared and got the distinct feeling that I should not be in the kitchen right now. I remember thinking that someone didn't want me in there. Being the science-based guy I am, I told myself that I was overreacting. Maybe it was the result of a static discharge from moving from rug to tile. I had never experienced that feeling before or after though, so I'm not really confident in that explanation. Anyway, in the moment, I just kept telling myself that this is my kitchen. There's no one here and nothing to be afraid of. I decided I was going to walk to the cupboard, grab a glass, grab my Brita from the fridge, and pour myself a glass of water. I felt like I had to prove that nothing was wrong, if that makes sense. Well, every step I took deeper into the kitchen, the electrical feeling got stronger. Literally every step almost felt more painful than the last, and I could shake the feeling that I was not supposed to be here. I grabbed a glass, opened the fridge, and was absolutely overwhelmed with the electrical sensation. Like I had seriously pissed this thing off for not listening to its warning. I poured my glass of water and got the hell out of the kitchen as fast as I could. As soon as I hit the living room carpet, the electricity went away, and the foreboding feeling started to recede. I went back to the bedroom, my girlfriend clearly waiting for me. She asked me if I felt it, and I said yeah. There's something weird going on in the kitchen. She freaked out at this point and told me she was expecting me to say everything was fine, and she was being crazy. We held each other close for the rest of the night and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I went into the kitchen and everything seemed normal. I never experienced anything even close to that feeling again, and to this day, I still like to chalk it up to some weird electrical phenomenon in an old Savannah duplex, but I don't know. I think I just want to believe that I experienced something unexplainable. If you've got a rational explanation for this, I'd really love to hear it. Hi. I am desperately seeking some form of explanation to this thing breathing in my everyday life. Back in 2018-2019, I experimented with spirituality. I got interested in the astral plane, and I had the great idea of seeking out evil. Every night before going to bed, I would pray and call out with strong intent for hell, for Satan, and for any demonic entity that could grant me something by offering my soul and my being. About a week passes, and suddenly I hear some heavy, raspy breathing in my apartment. First, I think it's some form of home invasion, but the breathing sounded half human, half something else. I freaked out, held my bedroom door for hours, called a friend and convinced him to come over in the middle of the night. I had a very hard time opening the door for him, since I was afraid of what I could run into on the way. Eventually he came in, and we laughed it off as I was going crazy. Since then, I've heard it consistently, every single night, also during the day, but more noticeable at night. It's there, even with earplugs in, and it's mostly from another room, but sometimes right next to me as well. I have moved to 2 different apartments in the span of the last 4 years, and the breathing remains no matter what. Here comes a very disturbing thing I experienced Monday and Tuesday night. I read somewhere that it was some form of entity that had latched on to me, and that these types of things feed on fear and negative energy. This makes sense, as whenever I fear and give it attention, it becomes 20 to 30% louder. I was told that the only way to get rid of a being like this is through pure love, forgiveness, and pity. That night, I started focusing on it, embracing it, and sending in a strong emotional love through mediation. I felt some form of warm light aurora around me, and it was genuine love I was sending. This made it slowly grow bigger in volume until it reached a point where I had a moment of doubt and fear. The aura I felt immediately disappeared. I had a rush of chilling cold energy around me, and the volume of the breathing broke into chaos. It became distorted and extremely loud. For a bit, my entire reality was shaking, and I went into a panic attack. Never had that before in my life. I was fearing that this thing would either hurt me, take control of me, or send me into a full psychotic state. It doesn't seem like coincidence to me that it all started after seeking out demons and pledging my soul, and the fact that it reacts to fear, and this aggressively to love. I had been to doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. I have tried a handful of different antipsychotic medication. It has zero effect on it. I am desperately seeking more clarification. Please help anyone and someone. So, this is a true story, and it actually happened to my mom. Now, it may seem unbelievable, but it really did happen. My mom had a loving relationship with my grandma and loved to visit her as a child until her unfortunate passing. However, strange things happened to her when she used to visit her house and to her grandma. In one instance, they were gardening together when footprints appeared in the freshly sowed soil. Another time, the toaster was painted and she and her grandma had to chisel it all off. Another time, she saw him across the street. Other times, the cat would stare off into seemingly nowhere and follow something and then suddenly leave. Another time, there was vacuuming in the neighbor's house while the neighbors were gone, and when they went to investigate, nothing was there. And once, there was a knife stuck in the side of the doorway. Now all this seemed really, really strange to me, and I half believed it. Until now. My mom's aunt moved into this house after my mom's grandma had passed. Then, my aunt passed away recently, unfortunately. So, my mom was there helping her uncle with selling the stuff and having a garage sale. She just called while on her way home and told me this. While selling some stuff, she suddenly saw this white rocking chair. There was a small boy, about 10, rocking in this chair very hard. He had brown hair. So my mom walked by and said something like, "Having fun in that rocking chair?" To which he looked at her very angrily and then replied, "It's haunted." My mom laughed and said, "Really? How do you know?" And he said, "It's haunted. I can feel it." He then walked off and my mom couldn't find him. It was as if he disappeared. She asked one of the other people helping if they saw the boy and they said no, which was reasonable since there were a lot of people there. She then asked where the white rocking chair was from, and they replied, "What chair?" The other two people who stayed in that house also said weird things were happening all night. I'm sorry, but what chair? Oh, hell no. This is horror movie material. All I'm saying is that I do not care how much family history we have in this house. I will never be visiting this house ever again. Nope, 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 with a big capital nope. I hope you guys like this story even though I am freaked out. My mom is now calling one of the other ladies and is going to ask about the chair and boy. So I will be sitting here with any update with my blessed cross and holy water. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And that, dear listeners, is the end of these true ghost stories and encounters. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. And if you are awake and listening, I hope you have enjoyed this collection. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night.